Hello everyone! In this presentation, we'd like to give a talk about fashion of the 20th century, which has definitely influenced our sense of it now.
The 1900s. A decade later, the heyday of the belly peak has arrived. Women still draw their waist into corsets, wear high heels and robe themselves in lace and silk in the evenings, but their increasing activity dictated new rules. Daytime clothing is becoming more practical, not without fashion trends. In high society, so-called chia dresses became popular, with a free silhouette allowing the coursing to be discreetly loosened, an important step on the road to emancipation. A new type of dress appeared, a narrow blouse with a floor-laid or ankle-laid flared skirt. Ladies were also borrowing something from men's wardrobe, overcoats for example.
In the second decade of the 20th century, the world was rocked by war. Under the influence of martial law, women's attire became simpler. Lavish pompousness disappeared and plumps became an attribute only for the most solemn occasions. Skirts lost length. Discretion became a sign of education. Corset blouses and skirts were now a kind of uniform for enlightened women.
The 1920s. The Bolsheviks came to power and life in the country was turned upside down. Public emancipation came overnight and swept everyone into a wave of new revelations. In Russia, the 1920s were also roaring without exaggeration. The tone in fashion was set by the capital's bohemia, actresses, artists, poets' wives, people of art, in a word. And while by day the woman was puritanical, looking tweed suits, early capes, low-heeled lace-up shoes, and cloche hats, in the evening she strips off her clothes. Flowing gowns, open shoulders, provocative slits, stockings, sheer fabrics, feathers, pearls, and sequins. A time of decadence and great change.
In the 1930s, there was a new course. An enthusiastic socialist realism triumphed in culture. People valued efficiency and versatility. Slogans and posters agitating for a healthy lifestyle and conscientious work were widespread. In order to start every morning with exercises and manage everything, you needed comfortable clothes. Simple sundresses made of chintz and wool, shirt dresses, midi skirts, pleated skirts and trousers, wide at hips and slightly narrowed down, were in fashion.
The 1940s. In the early 1940s, there was little time for custom. Militarization had a strong influence on fashion, and the baggy shoulders and broad shoulders were a sign of masculinity and strength. Strict uniforms became part of everyday life. However, at the end, the war transformed Soviet fashion, putting it on a par with European fashion, despite the catastrophic decline of the light industry in the country. Our women wore trophy dresses with lantern sleeves, little bolero jackets, hats and silk combinations brought by their husbands from Europe.
The post-war tightening of the screws was replaced by a thaw. The 1950s were a time when the Soviet economy was flourishing, although light industry was not in the vanguard. For the most part, people dressed monotonously, not as grayish-brown, of course, as the workers in Valery Todorovsky's stylogy, but similar. Simple dresses with monotone patterns, two-piece suits with short-fitted jackets and skirts just above the ankle and down to the knee. In essence, women's attire of the early 1950s was little different from that of the 1930s. But with the rise to power of Khrushchev, who had embarked on a course of rapprochement.
The 1960s. In the 1960s, a cultural revolution was already underway in the West, of whose true scale and influence not many people in the USSR knew. but certain categories of citizens, artists, and athletics knew. Editor Pican's tight-fitting, beaded, and feathery stage dress, for example, was clearly not Soviet outfit. Ordinary women also wanted to look as good as their stage and screen counterparts. Stiletto heels arrived in the USSR in 1961. Knitted turtlenecks, checks, bright synthetics, and fake furs were gaining in popularity, and skirts were becoming increasingly shorter.
By 1970s time, fashion had become really important. People already knew what was fashionable, but it was still extremely difficult to get it right. So miniskirts, jeans, fitted sweatshirts with noticeable colors, flared trousers, and patent leather boots with a heavy platform were sold secretly.
The 1980s. The 1980s were the dawn of an era which was changing. Pride of popularity was already evident even before Gorbachev in a time of mass shortages. The style went from extreme to extreme. Unisex style came into vogue, with girls wearing men's jackets, shorts, jeans, and rough boots. Feminine attire often verged on vulgarity, and that was the norm. Various subcultures started to emerge among young people, which also influenced fashion. A universal love of big washed out leather jackets and Jam denim was born of the punk scene.
In the 1990s, with the fall of the Soviets, the West poured into Russia in a massive flood, and despite the economic difficulties, the criminal situation in the country, and the general state of shock, it was welcomed with open arms. Grand fashions of those years included shirt tops, small-waist jeans, alcoholic t-shirts, skirts, micro shirts, blouses, and jackets with shoulder pads, like bellmen now, black capron tights, and acid colors.